everybody? Welcome back to the Let's Talk Review Show. This is the weekly show where I review a bunch of different movies for you guys. Sometimes movies that are in theaters, sometimes some physical media releases, sometimes some reviews for people who check out the channel. Our channel director reviews are on this show as well. And sometimes I'll just review some movies because I want to talk about them. And I got a couple this week that I just really want to talk about. And the first one is going to be 1996's Scream. I know, 1996's Scream. How many people have talked about it? Well, it is the beginning of spooky season. And the unofficial start of spooky season for me is always when I watch Scream. Sometimes it doesn't always work that way, but I usually like to start spooky season on September 1st with Scream, one of my favorite horror films of all time. And I realized I had never actually talked about the 4K Blu-ray here on the channel. I believe we started with Scream 2 as far as the 4K Blu-rays go, because Scream was releasing them each and every single year. The channel started in 2022, but in 2021, just before this channel got started, Scream came to 4K Blu-ray, courtesy of Paramount. So before I do that 4K Blu-ray review, I do like to talk about the film, and the reason why Scream is one of my favorite films is just like a lot of people who grew up in the 1990s, who came to horror films from those 1980s slashers. For me, the first horror film that I ever saw, and it got its claws into me, it got Freddy's claws into me, and that was 1984's A Nightmare on Elm Street. I remember I watched this with my brother and a couple of our cousins in Vegas. None of us had ever seen a horror movie before. We went to Blockbuster, we rented it, we were all way too young to be watching it, scared the hell out of us, but we fell in love with the horror genre, pretty much all of us, and we still, all love horror movies to this very day, and it all started with A Nightmare on Elm Street, directed by Wes Craven. Then, of course, I fell in love with the horror genre and all of those 80s slashers. And the thing is, I only saw A Nightmare on Elm Street before I saw Scream. There wasn't too many other movies in between. So I saw Scream way too young to understand its meta-ness. And that's a real big thing about this movie. Now, is meta-ness a word? I'm not entirely sure. I might have made it up. But either way, the movie is very meta. And from a guy who created some of the greatest horror movies of all time, and Wes Craven, the guy who gave us The Last House on the Left in the 70s, A Nightmare on Elm Street in the 80s, and he also gave us Shocker. I will never forget about Shocker. See Shocker, guys. And then, of course, in 1996, even though he turned it down originally, he gave us Scream, mainly because Drew Barrymore was attached to it. And I'm going to have some spoilers for Scream. I'm assuming if you've been watching this channel for any amount of time and you heard me talking about Scream, you know how much I love this movie, and you've probably seen Scream yourself, but if you haven't, stop this video right now and go check out Scream. But anyway, this movie stars Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Matthew Lillard, Skeet Ulrich, and actually is so much more, including Jamie Kennedy, and the cast is stacked. But this movie really relies on you seeing all of those 80s horror movies, mainly because it's just taking the slasher genre and showing you all those tropes, flipping them upside down, throwing a little bit of comedy in the mix, throwing in a great Kevin Williamson script, one of the best scripts apparently ever floating around Hollywood. That's why they really wanted to get this movie made. But attaching Drew Barrymore is what sold Wes Craven on this movie, finally got him to sign on. And then we killed Drew Barrymore off right in the opening scene of this movie. So even though she was at the center of the movie poster, she's not in the movie that much. And it really sets off the chain of events that is this film. Even though the chain of events really started off a year before the events of this movie. But it really is just taking the John Hughes movies of the 1980s and putting it in a slasher film. You even get Henry Winkler in this movie. It is one of the greatest horror movies of all time. It took me a while to come around on it. Probably like 3 or 4 times after seeing it, I finally understood it, mainly because I saw it too young. But when I saw all those horror movies, I finally got it. And Scream is just one of the greatest horror movies ever made. Well crafted. It's even got a great score. It's got some phenomenal acting in it. Yes, there are some actors. Like, I don't think I've never really thought Neve Campbell was the greatest actress. She's fine. But Courtney Cox really stands out in this movie. I think it's better than her role as Monica on Friends. Now, given I'm not the biggest TV fan compared to film fans, but I have watched Friends quite a bit. It's a totally different job that she's being asked to do. But, I mean, you know what? Courtney Cox really does have range. I actually think she's a very underappreciated actor. I think she gets roped in with the rest of the Friends cast, which we can all, I think, agree aren't the greatest actors. They were just great on this one sitcom. But Courtney Cox is a great actress, and she does a great job in this movie. And Matthew Lillard's awesome. I always love seeing Matthew Lillard. He's still floating around today. People love the guy. He's so funny. So many great stuff in this movie. It just comes from him.
Anymore. I'm feeling woozy here.
Get some of the biggest laughs out of me at the end of the movie. Whatever scene that was, was so miserable apparently to shoot at that one location, that house at Stu's house. I love the stuff between him and Billy and how he hits him with you hit me with the phone, you dick. I absolutely love that. It makes me laugh every single time.
Mama's boy.
fucking hit me with the phone, dick!
And this, of course, started the Scream franchise, and I have enjoyed all 6 of the Scream movies. Obviously, some are better than others, but the original Scream is still by far the best. I have to watch it every single spooky season. Usually I watch the entire franchise, but if there's only going to be one, it's going to be 1996's Scream, directed by Wes Craven. And if you haven't seen it, let's talk a little bit about this 4K Blu-ray, because it is an upgrade over the previously released Blu-ray that I actually have right here that came in this collection. Now, this collection, why am I holding on to it? Well, we've gotten every Scream movie on 4K except for Scream 4, so I have that in here. And the special features disc in here also features the Inside Story documentary that you should check out about the making of Scream. I love that. It's awesome. It's also got another documentary on here that's kind of looking at the entire Scream franchise, and that's not going to be featured on this 4K Blu-ray disc right here. And like I was saying, this came out in 2021. It's released by Paramount Pictures, and for me, it's a pretty big upgrade over that Blu-ray that's packed in here. Actually, that Blu-ray is really not that good. It hasn't aged that gracefully, but luckily, this 4K is really good. Now, one thing I want to show you guys, I'm sure people were talking about this when this first came out, but my case underneath is a Blu-ray case. I'm not too sure why. I guess maybe they ran out of 4K cases, but it is pretty weird, and I'm not a big fan of that. If I had some interior artwork, I wouldn't mind, but yeah, not really too big of a fan of that. This did have a steelbook as well. I opted to just go with the slipcover, and all my Scream 4K Blu-rays are with the slipcover, so they're all kind of uniform. But again, missing Scream 4 really bothers me. But it is an upgrade to 4K Blu-ray only in the visual department. The DTS HD Master Audio 5.1, it's the same on that Blu-ray disc, and I don't think it packs as much punch as I would hope it would. Now, it is still pretty damn good. It's just not something that blew me away. I think an upgrade in the audio is kind of necessary for this movie, mainly because it's relying on some jump scares, mainly because, again, we're playing with all the horror tropes, and the score is there just working with the movie the entire way. Love that about this film as well. But the 4K Blu-ray, I really think it could have used an upgrade in the audio, but this is something that Paramount does, obviously releasing them each and every single year, and then giving us the 3-pack at the very end of it was a cash grab, so I'm not too surprised by that decision. But when you also look at the visuals, okay, you're like, alright, there's the upgrade, and it is a very noticeable upgrade to 4K Blu-ray. You get Dolby Vision, you get HDR10, they kept the cool color timing. I was worried because, I think the Blu-ray itself was a little bit warmer than it actually has always looked to me. So it's always kind of had cool color timing. But the thing is, when you go to 4K Blu-ray, they definitely eliminated some of the film grain. I'm not too sure how they did that, but some of the film grain is definitely wiped clean while still maintaining it. But it's still very sharp, so you don't have any sort of issue with how the skin looks. I think the skin looks really good. The brightness level is very good as well. The colors themselves, I mean, it's not the most colorful movie in the world. That's one thing you'll notice when you go to 4K Blu-ray. The colors themselves aren't that bold. What you're really going to notice is that higher level of detail. When we get close to people's faces, it's definitely much clearer, because that Blu-ray, man, it is just awful in my opinion, especially now. Maybe I never really noticed it, but when I was doing the comparison for this, the visuals on that Blu-ray really are bad, and this 4K Blu-ray is definitely a noticeable upgrade, so it is worth it just to upgrade to the 4K Blu-ray just for the visuals. And you do get one new featurette on here. I should point that out. That new featurette is 25 years looking back on Scream. It's about 7 minutes long, and it's really Kevin Williamson and the cast of Scream 5 and 6, them talking about the inspiration of Scream. So it feels more like a marketing tool for the last 2 Scream movies more than anything else, and that's a little bit disappointing. I would have obviously liked like an hour-long documentary looking back on Scream, but again, you got that inside story on the previously released Blu-ray set. I don't think it probably comes if you bought the Blu-ray alone, but if you have that set packed in there, it's awesome. Definitely check that out if you have it. And Scream itself is an awesome movie. It's a great 4K Blu-ray. What would I give this 4K Blu-ray? A score of 1 to 10? I would still give the Scream 4K Blu-ray, even now, 3 years later, a solid 8.5 out of 10. I still really appreciate it just because it's a huge visual upgrade. I appreciate having all the Scream movies except for Scream 4 on 4K Blu-ray. So even though they are good, it's just something that you were going to notice isn't the biggest jump in the world. I think that I would have liked the colors to be just a little bit more bold, but it's unfortunate. But that's not a huge deal as far as the visuals go. I'm not too happy that we don't get new audio. The extras themselves, I appreciate them including all the extras that were previously released and giving us some new ones. That's something that really doesn't happen too much in 2024, so I appreciated that. But I still, of course, would have liked to see like a boutique label like Arrow or Scream Factory give this the real boutique level treatment, giving us something that all the collectors would love, something that all the 4K Blu-ray lovers would love, and something that all the Scream fans would love, because Scream, like I said, is one of the most popular horror films of all time, started a franchise. That's something that deserves like an ultimate collector's edition, and with Paramount doing the releases, that's just not going to happen. It's obviously money comes first, then the fans of the movie. But either way, I love Scream, one of the greatest franchises of all time, got started with it, so just check out Scream. And then the next movie we're going to talk about, just a step away from spooky season for a little bit, is one of my favorite director's films, and that is 1998's Spike Lee joint, He Got Game, starring Denzel Washington and Ray Allen, and also features Mila Jovovich. And John Turturro pops up in this movie as well. You know, a lot of other Spike Lee players pop up in this movie. And this is kind of one of the forgotten Spike Lee movies. When people talk about Spike Lee, they always talk about Malcolm X and Do the Right Thing, and I do as well. But he made a lot of other great movies. More recently, he made The Black Klansman and Defy Bloods, which people really like. But in the 1990s and the early 2000s, he made such classics, and I mean all three of these movies are classics. Clockers, He Got Game, and The 25th Hour. And right now, the only way you can get He Got Game and The 25th Hour on Blu-ray is in a double pack. That's out of print. I don't understand why these movies are forgotten. We've gotten some Spike Lee movies on 4K Blu-ray. We just, some of them have kind of gotten forgotten. And it really does bother me. I don't know why. Spike Lee is one of the greatest directors of all time. And as far as some of his movies go, they just don't get talked about anymore. And I'm not entirely sure why, because they are very well made movies. And at the time, they were pretty damn popular. He Got Game is one of those movies. It stars one of the greatest actors of all time in Denzel Washington, who's worked with Spike Lee in the past. Now, the biggest flaw of this movie is the casting of Ray Allen. If you don't know who Ray Allen is, Ray Allen was one of the greatest basketball players ever. He was originally drafted by the Milwaukee Bucks. At the time this movie came out, he was still playing for the Milwaukee Bucks. Eventually, he would end up on the Supersonics, and he would win a ring with both the Miami Heat and the Boston Celtics. He was on that Boston Celtics team that really started the Big Three and all these super teams. A lot of people say it started with LeBron, but it started with that Boston Celtics team. I think it was 2009 with Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen. I'm not going to go on a sports tangent, but, I am a sports fan as well. So seeing Ray Allen in this movie, it's tough because Denzel Washington really has to do a lot of the work. And the plot of this movie is actually very interesting because Jake Shuttlesworth, played by Denzel Washington, he's the father of Jesus Shuttleworth. But Jake is in prison right now for the murder of his wife. And I guess it's not really technically the murder. It's more manslaughter. He accidentally killed his wife. We won't see how until about the middle of the movie. But his son, Jesus Shuttlesworth, played by Ray Allen, is the highest prospect right now coming out of high school to go to college. And the governor of New York wants him to go to his alma mater, Big State. And he knows that Jake's in prison, and he's like, hey, Jake. And he tells the warden, tell Jake, you know what? He's got a week. We'll put him out on parole. And he's got to convince his son, Jesus, to come to my alma mater, Big State. Now, he's already interested, Ray Allen, at this, or Jesus Shuttlesworth. But, his dad gets out, and Jesus wants nothing to do with him. Mainly because he believes he killed his mother. And we see exactly what happened. And it's a tricky situation. It really is. Because Jake Shuttlesworth, whatever he was doing back in the day, he was not the greatest father. And I guess this is kind of like minor spoilers, so maybe you guys should stop. I kind of want to talk a little bit freely about this movie, so I am spoiling it. But in the middle of the movie, we see what happened. He's been drinking a little bit. He's trying to teach his son a lesson. He accidentally pushes his wife too hard. Now, he did probably mean to push her out of his way because he says, "Get away from me, woman." But she falls, hits her head, and it seems like she dies instantly. It was an accident. That's not what he intended to do. But you know what? He killed Jesus' mother, his sister's mother, and the sister's a lot more forgiving. She was younger at the time.
Not a stranger, he's our father.
I don't have a father. Hey, wait a minute.
Daddy, he's tripping.
Tripping?
But Jesus was right there, and that's a tough thing to see. So you understand why he's being so cold towards Denzel in this movie. And it takes the entire movie for him to finally come around. And I mean the entire movie. It's not until the very end of this movie that we see he finally came around. And they don't give you that big hugging moment, father and son moment. No, that never happens. Spike Lee withholds that from you. We get a moment where they share it from separate locations. Jesus is practicing, at Big State because he does eventually go there. And Denzel has to go back to prison, which really does kill me because it seems like they said he escaped from jail, which I would sue the hell out of the governor because the governor, even though he does choose Big State, he didn't sign the letter of intent. And the warden's like, well, you didn't get the letter of intent signed, even though he did go there. Let's just hope he does the right thing. But no one's going to believe that he got released from prison right after they pinned an escape on him. So that's just complete and utter bullshit that they kind of railroaded Denzel's character in this movie after they asked him to do a favor. And they never try and justify what Jake Shuttlesworth did. I love that as well. They don't try to make it seem like he's a great guy, because he's not a great guy. He even says at the very end, like, if you don't get that hate out of your heart, so I'm not going to say exactly what he says because he says a word I'm not going to say, but you're going to end up just like me if you don't. And that's finally what clicks in Ray Allen's head, like, yes, I can't have this anger inside of me because I am going to end up like this guy who right now I hate. And that hate is fueled by the anger I have, and I have to learn to forgive. And I love the message of this movie. It is a great movie. It's got a great score. The song for this movie, the theme song, He Got Game by Public Enemy, who's obviously most famous for doing the theme song to Do the Right Thing, Fight the Power. But they did He Got Game for this. I love this song.
With fear, beware. 2 triple O. It might feel good, it might sound a little something, but damn the game.
I listen to this song all the time. It's in my permanent rotation. But the score of this movie is great. It's very similar to a lot of other scores that Spike Lee has had done for him. Very similar to Do the Right Thing, but more similar to The 25th Hour. I think He Got Game and The 25th Hour have a lot of similarities. Similar monologues appear in each movie while the score's playing over it. I love all that Spike Lee-isms. That's how you know it's a Spike Lee joint. It's a very well-written movie. It's a very well-directed movie. And if you haven't watched He Got Game in a long time, check it out. I would give this movie a 9 out of 10. It absolutely deserves a Criterion 4K Blu-ray release. I feel like they would be the ones to do it justice. I can't imagine this getting released by a studio. It's really shitty that this and The 25th Hour are hard to get. Clockers at least has a Kino Lorber Blu-ray, but man, The 25th Hour and He Got Game are 2 Spike Lee movies I absolutely love. And if you haven't seen He Got Game, definitely check this one out. And the last movie we're going to talk about today is Scott Derrickson's Sinister. This came out in 2012, and at the time, people seemed to love this movie. They were scared of this movie because it's kind of an anthology movie built into a through line of a movie. This movie stars Ethan Hawke, Scott Derrickson, him and Scott Derrickson would work together again on The Black Phone. They clearly have a good relationship. Scott Derrickson, a lot of people might also know, is the director of Doctor Strange. So Scott Derrickson, he's a good director. I have always appreciated his work, but this movie is by far his best film, and it's a very underappreciated horror film at that. I think in the last 20 years, this is one of the best horror films that has been released. And the thing is, and I think this is why people kind of rope it in with a lot of other Blumhouse horror movies or even studio released horror movies, because it does rely a little bit on jump scares, but they're a little bit more justified in this movie. It does have some horror movie tropes, right down to the fact that Ethan Hawke's character is a writer who really enjoys drinking. You stop me if you've heard that one before. So obviously that's a trope in a ton of horror movies. And he's a true crime writer. Again, very tropey and very topical. So he's a true crime writer. He had some success in the past with Kentucky Blood, actually, and he's still trying to recapture that old magic. But because he does true crime, he takes his family to a house that his family doesn't know had a murder on the site where an entire family was killed in the backyard. And he's using that because he's going to be investigating that murder and trying to uncover some more information. Boy, does he uncover some information. He uncovers a string of murders, mainly because in his attic, he finds a set of old Super 8 films. He has no idea who shot these Super 8 films, but he starts watching them and he sees that they are a bunch of killings, and he has no idea who's doing these. And these are haunting, by the way. Everyone talks about the one with the lawnmower, but for me, it's the one with the swimming pool that really stands out, that is the most uncomfortable to watch. And, again, they're like anthologies because you're watching these horrific moments, and they scare the shit out of you. But then again, you come back to what is going on with Ethan Hawke's character and his entire family. It seems like it's a haunted house movie, but it goes a little bit deeper than that. You start to find out about Bagul, and I'm not going to go any further than this. I won't completely spoil this movie because I think it wraps the movie up perfectly to the point that we did not need a Sinister 2, but it's a horror movie. It made some money, so of course it was going to get a sequel. But the original one, the way it ends, I love it. It lets you know everything you need to know about the movie. Doesn't leave any stone unturned, but it doesn't feel like it's beating you over the head as well. It almost is done with no dialogue. Love the end of this movie and just how they give you the answers. It's a great horror movie. It deserves a 4K Blu-ray as well. This is one I could see Shout Factory releasing through their Scream Factory brand. I'm hoping it happens eventually because if I was going to give a score of 1 to 10 about the movie Sinister, I would give Sinister a 9.5 out of 10. I know that's really high, but I really do enjoy this movie. And guys, that's going to do it here for us on another episode of the Let's Talk Review Show. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video if you could. We also have channel memberships, so if you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer for the channel like John Doe Juggalo and Jason Martin, or you can even become a channel director like Mr. Smelly Potato and Frank from Frank's Medium Reviews. And if you are a channel director, your review will end up on the Let's Talk Review Show once every single month, no matter what the hell it is you want me to review. But if you got no money to throw our way, don't worry about it, guys. We just hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Get out in those streets and tell your friends about us. And then we'll be seeing you around.